All right, so here's our first example. Factor each trinomial. The first trinomial is 20x squared plus 11x minus 3. Okay, so our A is 20, our B is 11, and our C is negative 3. So I have to look for factors of 20 and factors of just 3. I'm going to put the negative aside for now. Not going to worry about it yet. So in 20, my factors are 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 3 doesn't go into 20, 4 does, and that's it. If you go any higher, if you go to 5, you'll start repeating. For C, my factors of 3 are just 1 and 3. So now I can build my boxes. So we have to fill in the first column with factors of A. Let's start with the factors that are closest to each other, 4 and 5. And then the second column we put factors of 3, right? We're still ignoring the negative for the moment. So let's put 1 and 3. Then we multiply the diagonals. 4 times 3 is 12. 5 times 1 is 5. Now the question is, if we add these together, do we get 11? No, 5 plus 12 is not 11. If we subtract these, do we get 11? 12 minus 5 is 7, which is still not 11. So this box is not going to work because we cannot combine 5 and 12 in any way to get 11. So let's make another box. Now in this next box, I'm going to keep 4 and 5, right? But I have to switch the order of the 1 and 3. You always want to flip this second column and see if that works. So I'm going to make it 3 and 1. Multiply out my diagonals. 4 times 1 is 4. 5 times 3 is 15. Now, 15 plus 4 is 19, but 15 minus 4 is 11. So these can combine to this 11 in the middle. Okay, so this is a good box. But we have to fix up the signs. Okay, so after you find a good box, you have to go back and fix the signs, make sure everything works. Focus on this B value. In order to get positive 11 in the middle, we would need a negative 4. Okay, that's the only way these are going to add up to positive 11. Now work backward. In order to get a negative 4, we would need a negative sign in front of the 1. And now this box is perfect because 15 and negative 4 combine to 11, and 3 times negative 1 gives us our negative 3. So we've accounted for all the signs, and we can use this to read off our final answer. 20x squared plus 11x minus 3 is going to factor into two binomials. The first binomial comes from the first row here, 4x plus 3. The second binomial comes from the second row, 5x minus 1. All right, check this. Go back and FOIL this out and make sure that when you FOIL this, you get 20x squared plus 11x minus 3. I bet you it works. All right, so here's the second trinomial we want to try and factor. 9p squared minus 18p plus 8. All right, so the b coefficient happens to be negative here. It's okay. We'll deal with it at the end. All right, so we start just like normal. Our a coefficient is 9. Our b coefficient is negative 18, but we're only going to worry about the 18 for now. And our c coefficient is 8. So we have to factor down a and c. All right, well, factors of 9. 1 times 9 or 3 times 3. Factors of c. 1 times 8 or 2 times 4. So now we start building our box. So we need to put factors of a in the first column of our box. Let's start with the ones that are closest together, 3 and 3. And then we need to put factors of c in the second column. So let's try 2 and 4. Okay, well, 3 times 4 is 12. 3 times 2 is 6. Can 12 and 6 combine in any way to get the 18? Yes, 12 plus 6 is 18. So this is a good box. We can work with this. We can get our final factored form from this because the 12 and 6 combine to this part of the b. Okay, so now let's actually account for the negative sign. Let's go back and mess with our signs so that we can get the negative part. What's the only way to combine 12 and 6 to get negative 18? Well, the 12 would have to be negative and the 6 would have to be negative. Negative 12 plus negative 6 will give us negative 18. But that is going to go back and change our signs in the second column here. So we actually need a negative 4 and a negative 2. But that's okay. Negative 4 times negative 2 still multiplies out to our c value, which is 8. So now everything works, and we can read our final factored form from this box. The two binomials that multiply out to 9p squared minus 18p plus 8 are going to be 3p minus 2 and 3p minus 4. So here's our trinomial for part C, 10y squared minus 11y minus 6. Let's see how this works. We happen to have a negative b coefficient and a negative c coefficient, but that doesn't really matter. Okay, we're going to use our same procedure and account for the negatives at the end. Actually, this polynomial is sort of familiar. We factored a similar polynomial earlier in this worksheet. Okay, but it had a positive 11. It had a positive b coefficient. So it's kind of interesting to see how the negative in front of the 11 is going to change our final factored form. In any case, let's go through and factor it like usual. Our a is 10. Okay, our b is negative 11, but we're only going to focus on the 11 portion. Our c is negative 6. We're only going to focus on the positive 6 for now. When you find factors of 10, you have 1 times 10 or 2 times 5. Factors of positive 6, you have 1 times 6 or 2 times 3. Now we start building our box. Let's start with 2 and 5 in the first column, and maybe 2 and 3 in the second. We check it out. 2 times 3 is 6. 5 times 2 is 10. Is there any way that you can combine 10 and 6 to get 11? Right, just focus on the positive part now. 10 plus 6 is 16. 10 minus 6 is 4. This is not going to work. So we move on to another box. So I'm going to keep my 2 and 5 in the first column, but I'm going to switch the 2 and 3 in the second column. So let me flip it. 3, 2. All right, so now when we check, 2 times 2 is 4. 5 times 3 is 15. This looks good, right? 15 minus 4 is 11. So that's gonna check out. Okay, this box is gonna work. But we gotta go back in and fix up all the signs, because actually we're looking for a negative 11 in the middle. So how do you get a negative 11 out of a positive 15 and a positive 4? You can't. But if you change this 15 to a negative, then you're talking. Negative 15 plus 4 is negative 11, so that's good. But if you change this sign, then you have to go back and change the 3 to a negative so that the diagonal multiplies out correctly. Which is perfect because now negative 3 times 2 gives us back this negative 6. So everything does check out. And we can read off our final factored form. 10y squared minus 11y minus 6 is going to factor into, look at the top row, 2y minus 3. Look at the bottom row, 5y plus 2. So there's our final factored form. All right, so here's the last trinomial we're going to consider in this section. Okay, let's factor negative 5a squared plus 7a plus 6. Now you gotta be careful here. This one is tricky. When you have a negative in front of the squared coefficient, okay, when you have your first coefficient here negative, the strategy is to factor out a negative sign first. What I mean is we're going to rewrite this trinomial, okay, by pulling out a negative sign. We're going to put a negative 1 in front of parentheses. And then ask ourselves, what trinomial do we have to put back in these parentheses to multiply out to negative 5a squared plus 7a plus 6? Okay, so in order to get negative 5a squared back, I would have to have a 5a squared as my first term in here, because negative 1 times 5a squared is negative 5a squared. Then I would have to have a minus 7a, because negative 1 times minus 7a is going to be positive 7a. And then I would have to have a minus 6, because negative 1 times minus 6 is positive 6. Now we're going to focus on this trinomial inside the parentheses and try to factor him. Okay? But this is a crucial first step. If you don't remember to factor out that negative 1, then you might be spinning your wheels for a long time here. Right? So I highly suggest whenever you see a negative in front of your trinomial to factor a negative 1 outside of parentheses, and then inside the parentheses you put the exact same trinomial except all the signs have changed. Notice the 5 went from negative to positive, the 7 went from positive to negative, the 6 went from positive to negative. Okay. So now we're going to factor 5a squared minus 7a minus 6 using our usual technique. So we're going to look for factors of our leading coefficient here. Factors of 5 are just 1 and 5. Then we have to look for factors of our last coefficient. We're going to ignore this negative sign for now. Factors of 6 are 1 and 6, or 2 and 3. And now we're going to build our boxes and try to combine to the 7 in the middle. All right, just disregard this negative 1 for now. Okay? In our answer we'll have an extra negative 1, but it does not play a role as far as building boxes and factoring this trinomial. Alright, so for our first box we're going to start with putting a 1 and 5 in the first column. That's our only choices. And then we'll put a 2 and 3 in the second column. Now if you look, 1 times 3 is 3, and 5 times 2 is 10. The question now is, can you combine 10 and 3 to get 7? Yeah, 10 minus 3 is 7. So this is going to check out. We just have to go back in and fix up our signs. So in order to get a negative 7 in the middle, this 10 has to be negative, right? Negative 10 and 3 combine to negative 7. But if you make this 10 negative, then that comes back inside here and changes the 2 to a negative. Right? 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. Our C value checks out, right? Negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. So everything is good. This is the box that gives us our final answer. Now be careful, when you write the final answer here, you are going to have a negative 1 outside. Right? It doesn't go anywhere, it follows along. You have negative 1 times, then you break down this trinomial into 2 binomials using your box. The top row gives you the first binomial, 1a minus 2. And the bottom row gives you the second binomial, 5a plus 3. So the overall final answer for the factored form of this trinomial is -1 times a minus 2 times 5a plus 3. So whenever you have a negative coefficient in front of the squared variable, whenever you have a negative a coefficient, your final answer is going to have a -1 factored out in front. Okay.